Hey, Carlos, I was just thinking about like this whole idea of we the people and, the American dream. And then you see these arguments come up about how actually there's been a persistent deception right from the start, right from the start. What's your take on that? It sounds pretty heavy, but also kind of makes sense when you look around.
Oh, Michael, it's absolutely crucial we talk about this. Because yes, from the very moment those words, we the people, were penned, there's been like a relentless pursuit by leaders here in the United States to subtly or not so subtly subvert democracy. It's been happening for over 200 years, and it's built right into the system, The deception is honestly cruel because it promises one thing but delivers quite another. It creates a system that ensures maximum inefficiency by design, actually.
Maximum inefficiency, huh? So you're saying it wasn't just like an accident or unforeseen consequences. It was designed to be slow and cumbersome, like intentionally so. That's a wild thought. What's the purpose of that? To keep things from changing too quickly or something else entirely?
Exactly. The Founding Fathers, they were actually deeply suspicious of government itself. So they built in mechanisms to slow things down, creating a system that would ensure what they thought was maximum inefficiency to prevent tyranny. But here's the kicker. It ends up rendering elections, our fundamental way of choosing leaders, almost pointless. They give us elections, but then impose these mechanisms that make them ineffective. It's a fundamental flaw, a cruel irony, actually, when you dig into it.
So you're saying the very structure designed to protect us actually neuters our votes. That's a big pill to swallow. How does that manifest exactly? Like, what specific parts of the system are you talking about that make our elections feel so, pointless, as you said?
It's not just a feeling, Michael. It's a reality. Look, the Constitution itself provides for elections, right? But then it imposes mechanisms that effectively render those elections meaningless. Take the separation of powers, for example, or the checks and balance system. We're told it's to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. But really, whose power is being checked? It's always the elected power, the power derived from the electorate. Nobody checks the Supreme Court, for instance, which is essentially the supreme branch of the U.S. government. And those are lifetime positions. They're not accountable to the voters.
Wow, so the unelected branch holds the real cards, essentially, and they're there for life. That completely shifts the dynamic, doesn't it? It makes you wonder then, what's the point of going to the polls if the people we elect can be overridden or checked by individuals who aren't accountable to us? It almost feels like a talent show, where the audience votes, but the real decisions are made backstage.
Precisely. It's like a talent show where you vote for your favorite singer and they win a recording contract. Here, you elect a politician, whoever sings the best, so they can win lucrative deals with business. It has nothing to do with your interests. It's a performance, not genuine representation. The entire political platform for any candidate is carefully drafted to serve the interests of whatever business sector they're targeting for campaign funding. That's why they push the policies and proposals they do. It's a calculated move to benefit their donors, not their constituents. And that's where the real deception lies.
So you're implying that politicians aren't really listening to us, their constituents, but rather to lobbyists and campaign donors? That's a common complaint, of course, but you're making it sound like it's deeply ingrained, almost by design. How does that tie into, say, corporations having more representation than the average citizen, if that's even possible?
It's absolutely possible, Michael, and it's worse than you might imagine. Most Americans today would choose their whole paycheck over their senator, right? Because their congressperson is often completely subservient to their campaign donors and to whatever corporate sector they want to enter once they leave office. They listen to lobbyists more than their constituents. And here's the kicker. According to the Citizens United decision in 2010, corporations have personhood status under the law. Not just personhood, but a super personhood status, because they're larger than life.
Super personhood status? So they have free speech rights? And that includes campaign funding? Meaning money literally talks louder? That's incredibly unsettling. It totally redefines the idea of representation, doesn't it? If a corporation can funnel unlimited money into campaigns, then it seems like their voice would naturally drown out the individual citizens.
It does, because the ruling states it would be an unfair restriction on corporations' freedom of speech to limit how much money they can spend to get whatever they want from politicians. So literally, money talks, and it speaks volumes. You pay a higher percentage of taxes than corporations do, but they have a higher degree of representation than you. This dynamic means that freedom and democracy, as enshrined in the founding documents, are fundamentally undermined. The system ensures that those with wealth can disproportionately influence policy, making it incredibly difficult for the average citizen to have their voice heard or interests served.
That's a pretty stark picture, Carlos. So, with this kind of system where politicians are tied to corporate interests and money equals speech, how does something like education fit in? I mean, a functioning democracy requires an informed and educated public, right? Isn't that what Thomas Jefferson even said about guarding against tyranny?
Exactly. Jefferson said a well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. So what can you deduce might be the objective when you make education prohibitively expensive? When you set up a system to restrict access to education for the citizenry and make it only accessible for the rich? Well, that's a recipe for tyranny, according to one of your own founding fathers. My mother was still paying off her student loans in her 70s, for crying out loud, and they keep finding new ways to discourage people from going to university.
So, it's not enough that it's expensive, they're actively trying to devalue it too? Like by creating degrees that don't lead anywhere practical. That's, pretty insidious. What kind of degrees are you even talking about? Because I'm sure a lot of people would agree that certain degrees might not have the same direct career paths as others, but useless seems a bit harsh.
It's not harsh when it's calculated, Michael. It's not enough that you expect an 18 or 20-year-old to come up with more money than it takes to buy a house just to get a degree. So you have to start creating useless degrees, these useless so-called disciplines, degrees in electronic feminist activism, degrees in navel gazing, so that you can then start to say, well, university is really pointless. As if there aren't still degrees available in the sciences, in law, in business, in history, in the fundamental disciplines. You make people think that university is all just a joke, so why bother? Meanwhile, the children of the elite are still going to university because they're the ones who are on track to be the managers of society. They're on track to rule you.
That's a powerful and disturbing parallel to make, Carlos. The idea that education is being manipulated to maintain a ruling class. You also mentioned that this strategy of dehumanization to exploit people has a long history in America. Could you elaborate on that? Because it really sounds like you're talking about slavery and the treatment of Native Americans, which are, foundational traumas.
Absolutely, Michael. They need you to not be human so they can morally justify exploiting you. The most obvious example, of course, is slavery. Other nations had slaves, but no one else in history assigned slaves subhuman status. In the Muslim world, for instance, the slave and the owner were brothers. But in America, the slave was considered a beast of burden, and the owner was a sadistic beast master. They needed it to be this way, because fundamentally, they do not believe in peaceful, equitable transactions or mutual benefit. They believe in conquest.
So dehumanization wasn't just like a byproduct of slavery, it was a necessary component to justify the act itself, especially while claiming freedom for all. And the same logic was applied to the indigenous inhabitants too, I imagine, displacing them from their lands and erasing their cultures for resource extraction and expansion?
Precisely. America was built on stolen land and sustained by stolen labor. It has a long-standing habit, a tradition of dehumanizing those who possess what it desires. For the African slaves, they were dehumanized for their labor, for the sweat and tears that built the foundation of a nation claiming freedom for all. But they had to dehumanize them in order to make that claim, you see. For the Native Americans, the indigenous inhabitants of that land for centuries, they were dehumanized for the richness beneath their feet, for the land itself. Their cultures were erased, their sacred lands violated, all for America's insatiable, ruthless hunger for more, for expansion, for dominance. It's a pattern, not an isolated incident.
That paints a very grim picture, Carlos. This idea of an insatiable, ruthless hunger for more and a belief in conquest rather than coexistence. Is this a characteristic you see unique to the Western psyche, as you put it? Or is it a broader human flaw amplified in certain systems?
Well, it originates from the Western psyche, which developed through its own peculiar history and culture. Not everyone is like that. In fact, most people aren't. Are you like that? Of course not. It's abnormal. The truth is that even most average Westerners, most average Americans are not like that. They believe in the philosophy of the last man standing. That's their approach to the world. First within what's now the territorial United States, then the entire Western Hemisphere, and then the whole planet. They applied this to Mexico, Central America, South America. Their natural resources were sought and their sovereignty trampled upon.
So America's pursuit of what it desires has always been characterized by exploitation and domination, rather than fair exchange or mutual benefit. It sounds like a mindset that struggles to understand win-win scenarios, that for them to gain, others must lose, almost by default. Is that what you mean when you say they don't believe in harmonious relations?
Exactly. They don't believe in mutually profitable transactions. Mutually profitable transactions represent some kind of loss for them. They don't believe in harmonious relations, fair transactions, fair exchange. They believe in conquest. America's pursuit of what it desires has always been characterized by exploitation, domination, and subjugation. For all their talk about capitalism and the market, free exchange, and so on, it's not what they practice, and it's not what they fundamentally believe. For them, capitalism means we make the money, we make the profit, we benefit, everything is ours, and nothing is yours. That's not capitalism. It's barbarism. It's piracy. You can't go into a business deal or a negotiation with that mentality. That's the mentality you have when you commit a bank robbery, not a business agreement.
Carlos, barbarism and piracy paints a stark picture. It makes me think of America First rhetoric, especially under President Donald Trump, where the mindset truly became America only. Is that the modern face of this conquest mentality?
Absolutely, Michael. America First is an overtly stated version of that historical belief in conquest. It's the conviction that if others prosper, America must be losing. This America-only approach views any other nation's success as an existential threat to its dominance.
So it's not just prioritizing their interests, but actively disregarding others. This seems to justify any means to achieve their America-only goals.
Precisely. This America-only mentality demands immense self-deception. It maintains a narrative of exceptionalism while engaging in subjugation and economic warfare. It's the mental gymnastics to believe they are good, righteous, and uniquely entitled to all global power, regardless of the cost.
And this self-deception, this need to believe they're good despite their actions, directly leads to the core contradiction in their self-image that we'll examine next. So this isn't just an aggressive foreign policy. It's a deeply ingrained mindset that permeates how they view everything, even their own economic system. And you're saying this predatory approach is rooted in a need to believe they're good, civilized people despite their actions? How does that reconcile with the reality of, say, the military-industrial complex and its role?
It's a complete contradiction. They needed to believe they were good, righteous, enlightened people who believed that all men are created equal. But they also wanted to continue treating African slaves as less than human, as less than equal. So they had to invent this idea that, well, they're not fully human, so therefore it doesn't count. It wasn't a violation of their principles to treat beasts of burden as unequal. By dehumanizing them, they convinced themselves that chattel slavery didn't contradict their claims of virtue. It's a habit of thinking that predates their actual power, and then having power just made it worse. I don't think anyone, especially the average person, thinks like that. It's abnormal, it's pathological, it's sick.
So, for the average Chinese business person, when they see casualty figures from the war in Iraq, they're not thinking about human lives lost, but rather missed market opportunities. And America's preoccupation with controlling the entire planet is seen as a national interest, but China isn't trying to dominate like that. How do you view these contrasting approaches in international relations, especially concerning something as destructive as war?
It's about practicality, Michael. Casualties of war don't go shopping. Until recently, the U.S. economy was war-driven by the military-industrial complex. That was the driver of the American economy. But manufacturing as a percentage of the U.S. economy has declined considerably since Eisenhower first talked about the military-industrial complex. Things have changed. To the average Chinese business person, when they see casualty figures from, say, the war in Iraq, they see that as that many more people who will not be customers that we could have sold to because they're dead. That doesn't make practical sense. That's not good business sense. Forget about the moral right or wrong of it, just from a practical business perspective. China isn't trying to dominate and subjugate the planet. Their approach to international relations is compatible with the historic Muslim approach. This approach is one of harmony, mutual benefit, bilateral, and multilateral cooperation.
So, China's approach to international relations is based on mutual benefit and cooperation, not domination. And you believe it's more aligned with historical Muslim approaches, even. But if that's the case, why do you think Washington continues to advocate for aggressive, confrontational foreign policies, almost as if they're stuck in an outdated playbook? It seems counterproductive in this evolving global landscape.
Because they're stuck. They don't feel they're losing money if both of you make money. They don't regard your prosperity or the prosperity of others as a threat to their own prosperity. They believe in mutually profitable transactions. They're incapable of updating their software, you see? That's what I think. The old American model of domination and subjugation isn't as appealing as it used to be, because the owners and controllers of global financial capital, the OCGFC, have more diverse interests around the world. Being profit-driven and practical, they are going to be inclining more and more towards the Chinese approach to international affairs, the Muslim approach, the BRICS approach, and I think that's what's happening.
So you're suggesting that even within the global elite, there's a growing divide, with some recognizing the need for a different approach. But the old guard, particularly the neocons in Washington, are clinging to outdated bellicose policies. How does this internal conflict play out, and what does it mean for America's role on the world stage? It sounds like they're being forced to adapt, but poorly.
They're adapting badly because, again, it's just not their nature. They're offended at any constraints on their belligerence. They're indignant at the idea that the whole world should not just offer them tribute and gratefully subordinate themselves to American power. They can't stand it. It doesn't compute in their minds. This is a habit of thinking that predates their actual power, and then having power just made it worse. And I don't think that anyone, most of all the OCGFC, believe that they can ever change. And that's why I think America is gradually being sidelined and being abandoned by the global elite. Because they're incapable of updating their software, they're incapable of updating their mentality, and they're incapable of civilizing. Having had the ability to impose their will around the world meant that they never had to civilize, and they don't actually possess any internal motivation to do so, and they never did. So ultimately, I think that they're going to be left behind.
It sounds like America is facing a monumental challenge then, a real reckoning. If they're being left behind because they can't adapt, what kind of intervention, as you called it earlier, do you envision? Because it seems like the consequences of not facing these truths are pretty dire, both domestically and internationally.
It's already starting to dawn on them, I think, that they're being left behind. I think they're in denial. Practically speaking, how exactly are you supposed to ever dial back from dehumanizing whole nations, whole countries, whole populations, and then treat them and expect to be treated by them in any kind of normal way? It's very difficult. So now, this same dynamic, the same dysfunction, is going to potentially permanently plague America's relations with the rest of the planet. Until today, the racial situation in that country isn't normal. They still don't know how to deal with each other in any kind of normal way. The immigration playing at the border, the poor working without rest, they are the voice of truth in a nation drunk on vanity.
So, to truly heal, America needs to dismantle this lie that money equals morality and face the deep-seated issues of greed, racism, and dehumanization. It's not just about policy changes then. It's about a fundamental shift in national character, isn't it? Like what King Solomon warned about greed bringing down a society.
Precisely. Perhaps one day, when the silver no longer satisfies, when the love of money blinds a nation to its own decay, America will remember the words of King Solomon, that the love of silver is vanity, and that abundance without justice is emptiness, and that no nation built on greed can stand forever. America's sickness is moral, not political. Its foundation is greed, not grace. Trump may fade, but Trumpism, the spirit of greed, racism, and dehumanization will always haunt us. The cages may open, but the walls remain. The money flows, but compassion dries up. America stands at a crossroads between repentance and ruin. It must begin by dismantling the lie that money equals morality. It must remember the words of King Solomon. It must remember what Thomas Jefferson said.
Carlos, these are incredibly sobering words. If America stands at this crossroads, what's the immediate truth it needs to confront to begin this path of repentance?
Michael, it circles back to the foundation. This nation was built on deceptions and exploitations, particularly the dehumanization of stolen labor. Until that core historical injustice is reconciled and repaired, any claim to morality or global leadership rings hollow.
So it's facing that colossal debt, that original sin, directly and with full accountability. A deep historical deficit needing addressing for genuine healing.
Precisely. Without that, it's cosmetic. Symptoms persist because the root cause remains unaddressed.
A powerful message to end on, Carlos. As a popular movie line says, and I'm paraphrasing, America, until you do right by the stolen Africans in this land, everything you touch will surely crumble. So, addressing that root cause is paramount. But practically, how does a nation begin to dismantle such deeply ingrained historical injustices? It feels like an overwhelming task.
It is, Michael, but it begins with acknowledgement, not just lip service. It requires a societal shift, a genuine commitment to reparations and restorative justice, not merely cosmetic policy adjustments. The spiritual and moral rot runs deep, and only a radical reevaluation of national identity can truly heal. It's a painful process, but necessary for any true redemption.
A radical reevaluation of national identity for true redemption. That's a profound thought, Carlos, and a challenging path for any nation. It suggests a future where America must truly grapple with its past to forge a new, equitable identity.
Indeed, and this isn't just about the past, it's about the present and future. Until these foundational injustices are genuinely confronted and repaired, the current societal dysfunctions, the racial tensions, economic disparities, and political polarization will continue to fester. True healing offers the only pathway to a coherent, just society.
That's a powerful closing statement, Carlos, emphasizing the urgency of this moral reckoning for America's very future. That's all the time we have for today, so we'll see y'all later.